Go to our first presentation, and this will be presented by Tony Conza. He's the project manager for a large project that just reached a milestone, and that has to do with, again, Site 12, which is Site 12 is better known as the Treasure Island neighborhood site on this section of the island. And there are some solid waste disposal areas within Site 12, and we have reached a milestone by completing field work in one of those areas, and Tony will be explaining everything we've accomplished. And this is at solid waste disposal area, Bigelow Court.
Well, good evening, everyone. So I'm going to give an update on the solid waste disposal at Bigelow Court, and this is within Site 12. It's kind of towards the center. You can see it symbolized there in the red box. So here's a map, and basically we removed some contamination in Bigelow Court. There was some previous site assessment work, trenching, and things like that, where a lot of historical work was done that led up to the point where we identified this work was done to help define the disposal area. And then we went back during this fieldwork mobilization this past summer, and we removed that contamination. So anyway, if you look at this map, identifies the contamination that was found during previous work, and the red areas symbolized PCBs, the blue areas symbolized polyaromatic hydrocarbons that had been identified in the area, and the lead was in blue. The green areas, there was some trenching work, etc., and there was no contamination found. So based on all that previous work, we came up with this area right here, defined as this disposal area. So we felt very comfortable going in and taking care of that at that point. So I'm going to go over, just give you a snapshot of what we did and what we came up with at the end of this. So the field work's complete, which is great news. So we removed the PCBs, lead, and polyaromatic hydrocarbons in those excavation areas that I've shown in the code areas in the map. And part of that work was we did radiological screening, and there were samples collected, etc. And there's actually a report with the findings that were being reviewed by us. And basically all the soil at Bigelow Court that we rate has been radiologically cleared, sampled, and scanned. And it's being characterized, and most of it, I believe, has been characterized for chemical disposal. So, and that waste sampling, you can see right here. So meets the requirements for disposal is non-hazardous waste. So being likely shipped to a California landfill with the acceptance criteria based on the data we've provided. Now, when we did these, part of this work was removing buildings, and the debris, the concrete, etc. That's all been radiologically cleared as well, sidewalks and things like that. Here's a map depicting kind of how our contractor CBI had gone forth and excavated these areas, and they kind of gave them letter coding just to kind of help keep track of the areas and organize their analytical data, etc. And plus, a lot of these areas were all different depths, so this kind of helped them, make sure that they achieve the goals and get all the chemicals concerned out of the ground. So after this, as part of this work, there was confirmation sampling. There was 58 planned locations. 42 of those locations were sidewall samples. And initially, once the field work was done, there were 3 locations that were above the chemical criteria for PCBs and lead. So what happened is, and this was obviously part of our work plan, we said we were going to do, we went out and excavated those areas laterally to get the extent of that contamination, because our whole objective is to get all the chemicals out of this area that were in the soil. So there were 4 step-out excavations. and 12 additional samples were collected to address those chemical exceedances. And what we got basically is the final sample showed that we did meet our remedial goals for those chemicals. This is a map depicting the sample locations. And in those different areas that I've identified with the letters from before. And basically, we had some exceedances here for PCBs, we had an exceedance here for lead, and we had some exceedances here for PCBs. These blue samples here were our step-out samples that were done when we did the additional excavation and additional sampling. So that sampling was done once we excavated, and indeed those results came down below the remedial goals which is PCB action level is 1 milligram per kilogram, and the lead was 400, so we achieved those goals for those particular chemicals. Part of this, like I mentioned, is doing a detailed radiological surveys and sampling as well. And there was 3 survey units. There was basically 84 samples collected total from all 3 survey units. And what we found from the sidewall samples and from the bottom samples that were collected, that basically all the samples agreed were about the same as the background that we're finding at Treasure Island for radium. So these samples are in the report that we're currently reviewing with the sample data. And this will be provided soon to the BCT for review as well. Here's a depiction of the survey units for the radiological sampling. You can see there's 3 units, and the purple, the survey unit 1, the brown is 2, and the blue is the little outlier areas around the edges. So basically, and these are all the sample locations, the systematic samples that we collected from those areas. So there's quite a spread and quite a good distribution to represent the area that we've excavated. Here's a couple of photos, and the chemical waste sampling that was done from the stockpiles once they were radiologically cleared. Basically, the piles are laid out, and once they were cleared, they would grid these stockpiles and go out and get with a hand runner, they grab the samples, and whatever waste criteria that the landfill requires, we sample for them and give them the results. And that's basically how we characterize the soil for disposal in the landfill. This is a picture. This is basically where we're at now, and we're going to, obviously the report needs to go through a review process, and at that point, we'll hopefully over the next month or so get an okay to get backfill these areas. But basically, a couple buildings are down. We've excavated all the chemicals of concern, and we have cleared the areas radiologically, and so we've achieved the objective of the Bigelow Court cleanup in this area, the solid waste disposal area. So this is the picture showing kind of the final conditions. So the excavation is completed. The waste disposal, which hasn't occurred yet, we need to get the characterization data and make sure that that's been properly evaluated by the landfill personnel, etc. Then we would, about 125 truckloads of material that's going to be going out as non-hazardous waste. And then in November, that radiological survey report I spoke about, that will have all of our characterization data from the radiological work. And that is going to be going out to the base closure team in November. And then there'll be a report coming in the spring that is basically a compilation report of everything that we did. It will have all the chemical data, the results, and the geometry of the excavations, and all the field work that we performed, and summarize that, show the results, etc.